Mother of invention, 212 and 213. Creativity has always blossomed in wartime. The development of new weapons and tactics can give one side a crucial advantage over the other. During the Second World War, scientists worked around the clock to produce extraordinary new weapons, machines, and medicines, all in a fraction of the time it would have taken to produce them in peacetime. So here's a picture of two British scientists at work on the mass production of life-saving penicillin. So a British engineer named Frank Whittle invented a jet engine in 1930, but the British government wasn't interested in his idea at the time. It was the Germans, operating completely independently, who first flew a plane powered by a jet rather than a propeller. The Germans went on, and here's a German jet-propelled Messerschmitt, okay? The Germans went on to design the Messerschmitt, the first jet fighter to be used in combat and the most sophisticated fighter plane of the war. 540 miles an hour, flew considerably faster than Allied planes. The Me-262 was the most deadly adversary for American bombers, but fortunately for the Allies, it wasn't introduced until 1944, and only a few were ever built. If they had been produced in greater numbers, it might have changed the course of the war, but Hitler insisted the new jet should be fitted with bombs and used to support ground troops. It was only used as a fighter plane when this proved to be a failure. Since the late 19th century, scientists had known that some fungi, I always pronounce fungi. I think it's fungi. It's just like sounding weird to me. Could destroy bacteria, which causes infections. But they weren't able to put this knowledge to use. In London in 1940, Australian Howard Florey and German refugee Ernst Chain managed to extract a substance from the fungus, Penicillium, which they named penicillin. Tests showed penicillin could be used to fight infections in wounds. Within 3 years, this new drug was being mass-produced in great vats, saving the lives of thousands of Allied soldiers. Think about all the times you had to take an antibiotic. They didn't have those. Military forces always needed vast quantities of fuel for their tanks, ships, and planes, and for vehicles to transport their soldiers and artillery. The Germans had no fuel supplies of their own and relied on the oil deposits of their ally, Romania. But this was never enough to supply all their needs. So German scientists devised a technique to produce oil from a raw material Germany had a lot of, coal. This process, which involved mixing pulverized coal with high-pressure hydrogen gas, was extremely effective. By 1944, 25 synthetic petroleum plants were producing at least half of all Germany's fuel. As the war progressed, revolutionary new weapons were developed, from radio-guided missiles to bouncing bombs designed to leapfrog over anti-torpedo nets. But not all these inventions worked. One, known as the Panjandrum, this is a very rare photograph of the Panjandrum during one of its farcical, that means silly, trials on an isolated British beach. On the outer rim of the wheel, you can make out the rocket engines that were supposed to drive it along. So it was designed to smash through concrete fortifications on the heavily defended coastline of France. It consisted of two enormous metal wheels with tons of explosives in its stubby axle. The wheels were driven by rocket engines placed all along the rim. It looked like a gigantic Catherine wheel. I've never heard of a Catherine wheel. Assuming that's like I don't know what a Catherine wheel is. And it was a disaster. Once unleashed, it was impossible to predict which way it would go. Some of the best new ideas didn't rely on complicated machines at all. British bombers used a very simple and effective technique to confuse enemy radar about where a bomber attack was heading. They dropped reams of thin strips of tinfoil known as window. These were picked up by German radar operators as a signal on their screens, which looked like thousands of bombers. This diagram shows a small formation of British bombers dropping window tinfoil to confuse German radar operators.